Hello! Welcome to the Turret of Pleasure here in the Enchanted Kingdom of Hermione on a beautiful sunny day. I am your host and the Lord Chamberlain, Zip Gun, and as usual, I'm here to talk to you about musical things mostly so far. The wind's coming up, looking good. Hopefully a tree doesn't fall on the Enchanted Palace. That would be bad. As often happens, I have friends on Facebook and the internet. They'll post stuff, and sometimes it warrants a response. And my friend Ferdy Bellin from Cranbrook was passionately arguing the relative merits of Kiss. I felt that deserved a response. We had some fun with that. And today I saw, about a week ago now, I saw my buddy Doug Smith in Vancouver posted some songs by Skip Spence from his Or record, which is an unusual record. Kind of like the American equivalent of the Madcap Laughs, perhaps. Now, if you don't know, Skip Spence was the original drummer in the Jefferson Airplane. That didn't last very long. Then he formed Moby Grape, one of the most hyped bands in history. They weren't bad. They weren't anywhere near as good as everybody said they were. And then they kind of fell victim to the rock star excesses, if you will. And Skip especially, he kind of lost the plot. I think he did a lot of LSD. And he kind of disappeared, and then he reemerged, and he found, of all people, David Rubinson, the producer, who was a champion of his, I guess. And they suggested he make a solo record. He was still under contract to Columbia, I believe. And so they chose the rather unusual location of Nashville to do this. And they made this solo record. Now, there's two types of people who listen to this record. There's the people who think it's really cool and great. Doug is one of them. And there's the people like me who just don't get it. And I listen to it, and what I hear is an extremely amateurish, kind of sad record where everything sort of sounds half-baked. But one of the things I noticed that Doug said about this record that really, I hear it all the time now. 1969, I think the record was. He played everything himself. Wow. What? And it's like, we still get this. If I hear one more person say Billie Eilish is a genius because she made her whole record in her bedroom, I'm going to fucking scream. Because this is not new, nor is it very difficult to do, even now. Well, especially now, but even back when Skip did the record, overdubbing was accepted. You could do it. And it got me thinking, look, okay, how many people have actually done this? And I started to realize there's a lot of people who did it very well. I give you Prince. His best record, in my opinion, is Dirty Mind. Played every note of it himself. I think largely through necessity. And then there's Tubular Bells. Yeah, he played everything on it except he got Vivian Stanshall to do the narration, which was a really smart move because it really puts the cherry on top. That record was a gigantic hit, huge hit. Started the Virgin record label, so big in fact that poor old Michael did the same thing over and over and over again. He did Hergus Ridge, which is like Tubular Bells Part 2. Then he did Amadon, Tubular Bells Part 3. He tried a few other things. None of them really did that well. Finally, in pure desperation, we get, yeah, you guessed it, Tubular Bells 2. You know what? I haven't even played this. I don't know if it's any good or not. Needless to say, he doesn't play everything on this. He hired some drummers. Whatever. But the the notion that playing everything yourself somehow makes it better does not wash with me, I'm afraid. And sometimes it's pretty cool. Now, okay, for example, now I've done a video on this record, so I'm going to keep this brief. One of the great jazz pianists of all time, the man who sold more copies of a solo jazz record than anybody in history, I give you Mr. Keith Jarrett. Now, Mr. Keith Jarrett was a wonderkind right out of the gate. He joined the Charles Lloyd Group, who were real big in the 60s, played the Fillmore, sold lots of records. Everybody in the band went on to, bigger and better things, with the possible exception of Charles Lloyd, strangely. I believe he went to sell real estate for a while. But Ron McClure went on to bigger and better things. Jack DeJohnette, of course, is a giant now. And, of course, Keith Jarrett. And Keith Jarrett parlayed this into a deal with the then Atlantic subsidiary label Vortex, which is a label I will probably talk about at length later in another video. But Vortex put out 14 records, every man jack of them great. And amongst these records was the debut of Mr. Keith Jarrett with his trio, Charlie Haden, Paul Motown. They did a great record called Life Between the Exit Signs, which is just Jarrett. He's fully formed. He sounds just like he does now, pretty much. Very similar, anyway. And it's really good. But, I don't think that was enough for Keith. So Keith decided he was going to make a really different record. And I'm going to quote from the liner notes of this record. Okay. Talking to his producer. Like to do something different next time, he said one day. Okay. Might do some singing. Okay. Might not play much piano on it. It's enough just to sing if you're going to sing. Think the company would mind? No, we've got carte blanche to do what we feel will reach more people. This would end, folks. Okay, I'll start thinking about it. Yeah. And like this record is great. How to approach this album, and there's a whole list of ways you can approach it. But the first one is astonished. Wow, one man did all that. This is a terrible record. It's terrible. The singing is terrible. The guitar playing is pathetic. The tambourine playing is bad. It's not very good. Now, I'm going to try and hold this up close enough so you can see the little chart they've provided. Isn't that great? That tells you everything Keith plays. So, if playing everything yourself makes a record better, I would hate to hear what this sounded like had he hired people. Now, of course, he didn't play everything on this. He had to hire a string quartet, who he fails to name, which I think is really cheesy. And yeah, this record is so bad that it goes unmentioned in the Keith Jarrett anthology that I bought on Rhino, which covers everything up to the end of his Atlantic era. Not a song from it. Not a song from it. And no mention in the notes. It's like it never existed. If I were Keith, I'd probably want it that way. It's not very good. Now, he did another one. Actually, he did two more. He did one called Spirits, which I haven't heard in a long time. And then he did one called No End, which I did buy recently. And No End is a funny one because it was recorded in his shed after he'd made quite a bit of money. And yet it was recorded on two Tandberg cassette decks where you just bounce them back and forth, which, as you might guess, leads to a fair amount of hiss. And it's sort of a rock record. He plays mostly guitar. I don't think he plays any piano on it at all. Drums, some finger cymbals, tablas, stuff like that. It's a little bit new agey. It's kind of instrumental, and were it by anybody else, none of us would care. Nobody would give a shit. But it's Keith Jarrett, and I bought it. It's a double CD. He's very sketchy on the details, like all ECM records. It mentions that he did it over a period of time, but it doesn't mention whether he's done this since or before, or whether this was just an isolated period of time. where he felt the need to get out his rock Jones, or I don't know what. But having said that, it's interesting, and I'm really interested in Keith Jarrett. I find him sometimes unbelievably pretentious when he speaks, but his music is what counts, and his music is, for the most part, extremely good. He casts his net very wide. He does orchestral music. He does the Spirits record is kind of like a world music pastiche thing. His strength, of course, is the piano, and more accurately, solo improvised piano concerts. And I think to this day, that's his stock of trade. And to be fair, ECM made so much money off this guy that they could do it with anybody else. But it's funny because the more I thought about this whole one-man band thing, I thought, well, now, what was the first to do it? Well, now, the obvious answer is Les Paul. I don't have any Les Paul here. He did How High the Moon, where he not only multi-tracked himself and his wife, Mary Ford, but he did a lot of double speed guitar, a lot of weird, 1953, I think it was, stuff that was very unusual at the time. Nobody had ever done this. But somebody had. I didn't know this. Somebody had done it before Les Paul. And that somebody was, rather surprisingly, the delightful Slim Gaillard. Slim was part of a duo called Slim and Slam. Slim and Slam? Him and a bass player. Now, Slim almost invented this hipster language called Voot. And there are some great songs. This is a compilation on Verve from the 90s, I guess. Laughing in Rhythm. And there's a lot of great, The Bartender is Just Like a Mother. That's a great title. Laughing in Rhythm, Potato Chips, Chicken Rhythm, a lot of food songs. My kids used to love potato chips. They'd sing it all, "Ooh, potato chips, my mouth just drips." However, hidden on this is a song called Genius, a.k.a. Ride Slim Ride. And on this CD, on this song, done in 1952, it doesn't say where, but if you look at these two photos, I am pretty sure this is Slim doing this particular song. Now, he plays everything on this, and the only way they could have done this in those days was by bouncing tracks. So he plays trumpet, trombone, he plays tenor sax, he plays, what does he play? I'm going to just double check this. It's a real list of stuff. Trumpet, trombone, tenor sax, vibes, piano, organ, bass, drums, taps, and vocals. Recorded March 5th and probably 13th, 1951 in New York City at an unknown location. This is the second. Uh-oh. God, there's commotion out in the real world. Luckily, we're insulated from all the travails from the modern world here at the Enchanted Kingdom, so we don't have to worry about things. Now, this is the second time I've discovered overdubbing. And the first time is great, and it's here somewhere, but I can't find it because it's buried in garbage. It would take a bit of a spelunk to find it. But back in the good old days, Caruso, who was the first big recording star ever, who had died young, like all the great recording stars, and when electrical recording came along, somebody somewhere thought, you could just play a recording back, and then while it's playing onto another recorder, you can add something. And somebody, I'd love to know who the first person to do that was. But at any rate, somebody at a record company, some greedhead at a record company, someone went, the complaint I always hear about those Caruso records was that the orchestra wasn't very clearly recorded. Who knew? They were recording into a horn, all of them, at the same time in one room. And if you see photos of these old recording sessions, they're all crowded around the horn. And, that's what you had to do. However, electrical recording solved this problem. You could put microphones, and you could feed them into a mixer, I guess. God knows how crude the mixers were. But somebody somewhere got the really bright idea of re-recording the orchestral tracks to Caruso records. Now, sadly, headphone technology was in its infancy. And so the technical limitations of the day, which this would have been about 1939, I think, meant that only the conductor could hear the backing track. And he would conduct the orchestra based on what he was hearing in his headphones. Now, as you might guess, classical music having its little peaks and valleys of speed and stuff, the new orchestra is not going to be in sync with the old orchestra very well. And that was exactly what happened. You ended up with these terrible, terrible, mushy disasters. Did they sell? Oh, yeah, of course they did. Oh, new improved sound by Caruso all over again. I think if you were 1,000,000 years old now, you could have bought Caruso records 8 or 9 different times, each with a subsequent level of improvement. Back when the LP, well, actually, when the 45 record came along, they put them out. When the LP record came along, they put them out. When digital came along, I've got all those ones somewhere, they put them out. And then Naxos, I do believe, did the last word and, remastering and whatever. And, if you want Caruso now, you can actually get a decent sounding Caruso record. Seeing as they were recorded 120 years ago, it's not too bad. But to sum up here, just because somebody does everything all by themselves in their bedroom doesn't make it good. It just means that they are capable of playing more than one instrument, and they can get their head around the process of playing with themselves on a tape, which is not very hard. I was doing it when I was about 15 on a tape deck that I broke from the high school I went to. And, Todd Rundgren did it, and, Prince, like I say. Nowadays, it's actually probably more the norm than the exception for a lot of people. If you got a laptop, you can do it. So, next time you want to say that a record is great and you go to the idea that it's great because somebody did it all by themselves, think about Restoration Ruin. Think about Or. Imagine what Or would have sounded like with a real drummer on it. I noticed that, like I say, a lot of these people did this out of necessity. Certainly when Prince got enough money together, he put a band together and he hit the road, and what a band it was. I still actually kind of preferred his stuff where he played all by himself. But having said that, you know that Prince wanted to just sing and play guitar at his live shows. So he formed a band. Of course he did. Nowadays we have looping pedals. Looping pedals have led to a form of music I call jagwalp. Jagwalp. Just another guy with a looping pedal. There's a lot of these guys. I'm one of them sometimes. In fact, there's a video on my channel where I use my looping pedal. And, it's a useful thing if you want to kind of create a band live. It's hard to do. You got to have your wits about you. But, everybody's been doing it forever. It's not a big deal. I don't see why there's such a big thing about it. That's my 2 cents on the matter. Thank you, Doug, for posting this, because it meant that I listened to Or again, and it's got its charms. It's sort of a sad record because poor old Skips was just fried by that point. It reminds me of the Syd Barrett records, which also evoke a certain amount of sadness in me. But yeah, that's the one thing I've been thinking about for a few days. That and the sadness of the Titanic sinking. Jeez. It just breaks my heart every time it goes down. The Britannia, not so bad. I don't think too many people died. Plus, it was in the Mediterranean, so it was warm water. And they were really close to shore, so I think it wasn't so bad. But still, wouldn't have liked to have been a passenger in either one of them. Anyway, that's it for me for today. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button. We're working on some kind of special thing for true devotees. We haven't really figured out what it's going to be yet. And I guess we'll talk to you later. Thanks for watching, and Stay safe. Take care.